So the first thing we're going to look at is the approval of the February 5th meeting. I didn't have any, I didn't see any errors or anything that needed changes. Does anyone else have anything that needed to be changed, or should we?
I did have something.
Yeah.
There were several references to, I'm Michael Milch, and I'm officially now one of the council liaisons to the Parks Board, but I had made travel plans during the night of your meeting and couldn't go. But during the meeting, there were several references to people who were going to be listening to the exciting audio of the meeting, and that's exactly what I did, was listen to it.
Well, that's
and
great.
I noticed that one thing that came up was a lot of confusion in terminology between parks utilities fees and parks user fees, and I think the minutes ended up kind of reflecting again the use of the term utility fee when you really meant user fee. But the distinction, if it comes up again tonight, is a utility fee might be a fee that we add to people's monthly utility bill so that everybody in the community who owns property is sort of paying a pro rata share for operating parks. And that was something the board was not particularly in favor of doing, as I recall the discussion. But the other option is park user fees, which is where people who use the parks for various purposes, like unloading their boat or having their teams play there or something, would contribute as users. And that had, I think, more support from the Parks Board than the idea of utility fees. Is my memory of that pretty
Your memory of that
accurate?
is correct.
Okay.
My memory during that meeting in February was rough in general, and I was actually the main person that was making the mistake. And I think that it did get, if you go down to the goals under 11, I guess it's not even really 11B, but it's kind of after 11B, that I think we did get the language right there as the fifth check mark that says explore parks user fees, which is what we want. And then for the parks utility fee, it does say that I said that this is a yes, and that is what I said literally in the meeting. So I feel like the minutes accurately reflect what I said, and the rest of the board, after we clarified that, said no. So I feel it's fine to leave the minutes to reflect my actual confusion during the meeting, and I will try to eat dinner before coming to meetings. So, but yes, you're correct that I think overall we were, as a board, on the same sense that we do not think that utility fees are something that the community would be in support of at this time, and that we are still interested in exploring user fees for park per use or seasonal use for, say, soccer or t-ball clubs or stuff like that, and that those are different. And hopefully that this now reflects that with the check marks of the 5 goals of user fees.
And the other comment I would make from also having listened to the meeting was, in spite of your not having eaten dinner that night, you led a very well-structured and good flowing discussion of these various options for making the park sustainable. So I want to commend you and the board for a really productive meeting on that issue. That was very helpful to listen to and to kind of see how people's thoughts flowed on that whole topic. So.
Well, that's good.
Yes.
We'll try to do the same thing here tonight. So with that said, I think that the meeting minutes accurately reflect my flubs, but then also correctly say that as a board we do not want we don't really want to explore utility fees at this time. So even with my gaffes within the minutes, I still want to approve them. I don't think they need any changes. Anyone want to?
I would only like to say, I wasn't at the meeting, but I would like to say that in the parks, when they did the parks master plan and they did the stuff on the, what is it called? What's the word I'm looking for? They asked people to do the online
survey.
The survey?
The community surveys. People were willing to pay.
They were.
They were willing to pay, just to note that.
And I think that it's not even off the table for the future. I think that it's probably not in the top 3 first actions. But for approval of this February meeting minutes, there we go. Any opposed?
No, I'd move to approve.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Ayes have it. Okay, so for number 3, the park system development charges presentation, everybody, it looks like, has a copy of that in front of them. And our notes say that there's a draft report online. I'm not doing this presentation, which means Jim
Yes.
is going to introduce.
Yep. Yes, so we have John Gillarducci here with us today. He's going to do a short presentation on the parks SDCs. He's done these similar to our water, sewer, and storm, and we're getting ready to do our transportation as well, but they all kind of are the same a little bit. But this is, some of you have probably seen this, but I doubt the Parks Board has, so I thought it'd be great to have John come and do a presentation on some of the laws and stuff. I did want to just kind of bring us up to speed where we're at. Back in October, the Parks Board, decided to go ahead and move forward with doing this study to add a Parks FDC. We are currently in the 60 days that we have to have the report available, and a month ago was the 90 days that we had to give notice. And John will talk about this. I'm probably stealing some of his thunder, but anyway, so where we're at now is we're going to do a presentation to you all, see if you have any questions. And then, just as a reminder, on May 8th, we will have a public hearing on this, and that's when it gets made official, and people can come and protest or whatever they want.
No.
Right.
Don't jinx it.
So anyways, John.
No, it's like saying it's going to rain. You bring your umbrella and it doesn't. Bring on.
So the way that we've laid this out, I'll do a little bit of background, which is, as Jim described, a little bit about the law and SDC, System Development Charges, or SDCs, and their background, and then get right into the main components of the calculation. The growth, and then the improvement fee cost basis, and that's basically the project list. And then we'll summarize that. We have some comparatives for you, and then we'll talk about the next steps. So these, in contrast to park user fees or utility fees, these are one-time fees paid upfront at the time of development by new development or redevelopment, certain types of redevelopment if they're adding impacts to your park system. So in general, properties that are already developed don't pay system development charges. These are for capital only, so we calculate them based on the cost of projects to be built, and you can only spend the money on those projects, actually portions of those projects, which I'll talk about more. These are intended to be a share of the parks system in Gladstone. So if this were a water system, we'd be talking about the major system facilities and not the connection, the meter or the connection to the system. So it's a share of Gladstone's park facilities. The law is pretty specific. It's spelled out in ORS 223, 297 through 314. It tells us what we have to consider when we calculate these charges, how you can spend money. But all the rules are there. We have some case law that has come up since adoption of the Act, and we follow that case law very carefully too in addition to the statute. The calculation looks something like this. Usually there are two components to an SDC. One of them is a buy-in to any existing capacity in the system that you have that's available for growth to use. We don't have a reimbursement fee in this instance, and that's because of the methodology we're using. The second component, which is the one that is the focus tonight, is called the improvement fee, and that's all about what is going to be built in parks. So that's straight out of the Park Master Plan, which has been very recently adopted. We take the growth-related portion of each of those projects, add it up, add them all up, and divide by the growth that they will serve, and that gives us our improvement fee. And in this case, that gives us the system development charge in total, since we don't have the reimbursement. So the first key piece of the SDC calculation is the growth, and harkening back to the calculation, that's the denominator in the charge calculation. So we're using population growth right out of the park master plan, so we're consistent with that plan. And then we also have to forecast employment in Gladstone. So we have a couple different sources that we use, U.S. Census on the map and Metroscope 2040 Gamma forecast. We also go through a complicated calculation to figure out one employee in the city of Gladstone who's working in Gladstone, their access to the parks is less than a full-time resident. So we actually calculate that one employment is less than half of a residential population equivalent, basically, because they can't use the parks as much. So we use that factor and then forecast the growth. We have the population growth from the master plan and then employee RPEs. So these are employees adjusted for that 0.43 factor. That's total growth for the 10-year planning period of 592 residential population equivalents. Most of those are population 403. You'll see this 4.36% number again. All that is okay, after Gladstone grows, and it may or may not grow as forecasted, that 592 RPEs, that 592 RPEs will be 4.3% of the total number of RPEs at the end of the period. So that's just the growth share of future RPEs. So this is a summary of the project list. And we don't have the individual projects listed, but they're listed by type. Important numbers, about 4.6 million in total planned projects, and a little less than 9 acres added in total. So the way that we'll go about, because we have to come up with a percentage for each of these projects that's eligible to be included in the system development charge. That's the growth-related portion of each of these project types. So the way that we do that is summarized here. We basically look at the end of the 10-year planning period, so in 2028, assuming all those parks are constructed, that'll add a little less than 9 acres of parks in the city of Gladstone. We calculate the level of service that the city will be delivering at that time, and that's just total acres of parks divided by total population at the end of the period. So that's going to give us some number of acres per thousand in population. We compare that ratio to the current ratio, the current level of service being provided in acres per thousand. And because the city will have a slightly higher level of service at the end of the period, we can't include all of those projects in the SDC because some of them are raising the level of service to meet that same number for today's population. You actually don't need to know this level of detail, but I'm trying to set the stage for you because here are the resulting percentages. Of the the main projects planned that are adding acres, we can include a little over 3/4 of those projects because of that level of service approach that we're taking. For the master plans related to the different types of trails, these are weighted average percentages because we're looking at all the different components of community parks, neighborhood parks, and trails. And some of that stuff's not includable in the SDC, so that's why these percentages are a little lower. There are a number of projects which we're calling growth share eligible. They're improvements to parks, but they're not adding acres. So only a proportional percentage, that 4.36 from the other page, can be included of those. So long story short, of the 4.6 million total, about a little less than 40% of that, 1.8 million, is includable in the improvement fee calculation and in the system development charge calculation.
Before you leave,
Chuck.
Yeah,
So-
it is a good job.
I'm confused. Cost to the city, you've got that whole line, the 4.6 at the bottom, that, you add all those up, and it's more than 4.6 million.
Oh, this
Yeah.
is the total of these three.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, we've got some, and master plans here, these italicized ones, I'm glad you brought that up, are the total of the three below it, and the 120 is the total of the three below that. So that's why, that should explain. You've got 2.2 million, 120, 671, and 1.6 million. Gets you the 4.6. Sorry about
Thank
that.
you.
That's not real clear, but that's what it is. So the way that converts to a system development charge, there's that SDC eligible portion, a little less than 1.8 million. That's the projected growth in residential population equivalents, the 592. We divide that into that, $3,009 per residential population equivalent. The law allows us to add, we call it a compliance fee. This is the way that the city gets reimbursed for the cost of our study, for administering and accounting for the SDCs on an annual basis. So it's basically a markup, and this is the only exception to the rule that everything's for capital, because that is actually the way the city pays itself for operating the system, basically, the SDC system. So that $3,060 SDC is per RPE. In order to convert that to dwelling unit charges and a per employee charge, we multiply it by the average occupancy for each of the dwelling unit types in Gladstone. For single-family residences, average occupancy of 2.44. So 3,060 times 2.44 gives us our SDC of 7,477. The employee number is not applied per employee. Obviously, when you get a new business, you don't know how many employees they're going to have. So we use these ratios by land use. We actually have pretty good industry standards about the square feet per employee for these different land uses, so we actually convert these non-residential charges to a system development charge per 1,000 square feet of floor area for these different land use types. So that only has to do with new commercial development.
So you're giving a reduced SDC for accessory dwelling units, which I think is fantastic, because that's a great way to encourage it. But that's a challenge that a lot of the other cities in this area are running into, is that they're not discounting for ADUs. Is that something that we're not going to have a problem with?
Well, there's nothing in the law that says that you need all these different land uses.
Okay.
So, or I should say, distinctions among residential dwelling
Categories.
types. Yeah. In fact, there's a lot of them that are just have one per dwelling unit charge, and it doesn't matter if it's a multifamily dwelling unit or a single-family
Right.
residential dwelling unit. So we're, so that is a policy choice that the city could make to not do that. We had the information, and we understand it's a reality here, so we calculated it based on the average occupancy.
I just want to make sure that it's okay, because the other
Absolutely
cities
okay.
have said the single-family developers are coming back and getting upset because the cost of the ADUs is less, so they bumped them up to be single-family, period.
There are a number of other cities that use these distinctions.
They do, okay,
Yeah,
cool.
so you're not on any shaky ground
Okay.
by doing it. So to give you an idea of where that would place the city, and of course this is just a small cross section of sort of neighboring cities and jurisdictions. You got North Clackamas PRD in here as well. But you see Oregon City, and then Happy Valley. They actually have a calculated fee that's much higher than that 7,000, like it's over 20,000. But they decided that the customer base couldn't stand at $20,000. Park SDC, so they set it at $7,000, which you have the power to do. You can't exceed the calculated charge, but you could adopt something up to that amount. You see Sherwood, West Linda, Lake Oswego, all in the region on the higher end. But again, just to give you an idea, and of course everybody's plans are different and parks are different, so it's hard to compare these, but I know it's usually of interest. So
This is just
there it is.
parks.
Just parks.
So
And
this
this
would
is-
be double the current SDCs, am I wrong?
And this is just
We
for parks.
currently do
This
not
isn't
have
everything
any parks
else.
SDCs.
We have
I
none.
understand we don't have any
Oh,
parks
oh.
SDCs, but we do have SDCs. So if I'm
Yeah.
coming in as a developer, I'm paying already 7,000 plus on the freight, correct?
I believe our water, sewer, storm, and transportation all added up is,
Like 3,000?
no,
Oh, it's
now
more
with
than
the
that?
update,
Now?
I think we're up to 17, 18, somewhere in there.
17, 18 now.
Yeah, so if you do a total of
From
West
two.
Lynn, for example, if I'm not mistaken, they're pushing 40
Yeah, yeah.
total. So with this, we're gonna be sitting in the mid-20s. I just.
So the
guessed
mayor's
it.
point about ADUs, one of the things that City of Portland did obviously was they did a moratorium on the ADU SDCs to be able to generate the ADUs. And we look at that as a better densifying program than multifamily complexes.
Yep.
I would hate to put us in a position where we're stopping that kind of development, although we need to address it obviously because it's
Yeah.
a 400 square foot footprint. But if we're up into 17,000 now, you're talking about
No one's gonna want to build it.
it's going to be interesting. These conversations are going to be really interesting.
Right.
To adopt it. I mean, I believe in it, and I think we should do it or do something,
Right.
but still got to look at the numbers.
Does Gladstone allow for ADUs?
Yes.
417 square feet.
417?
Yeah, so it's not a
Or less.
Footprint?
yeah
Be
footprint.
200.
Go up?
No,
Oh,
it's
okay.
flat, and the problem with that is, it's not a driver for folks, it's not a motivator for folks.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why they did it at that level, but.
Yeah.
It was an afterthought. I was
Anyhow.
on the planning when we did it. It was 200.
It was 200.
Woohoo, we're moving it up. And,
Closet, I could convert my closet into an ADU.
Exactly, but you still have all the setback requirements, so it was, yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
John,
So
from,
is there no sliding scale? Does it matter if you build 1,000 square for $100,000 house or a $500,000 house? Are you still paying the same $7,000?
That's right.
Yep.
It's classified as a single-family dwelling.
You could try to add distinctions like that, but you need to have a pretty good correlation between the house size and the house value and the use of the parks, and that's been hard to make that kind of correlation.
I have one question. What define a redevelopment? What's the minimum redevelopment that you can start charging SDCs for?
So, well, I'm having a hard time thinking about how it would apply to parks, because if you redevelop a single-family dwelling unit into a different single-family dwelling unit, no SDC would be due.
Okay.
Parks. If you redevelop a single-family residence into a commercial structure of some kind, then depending on which of these land uses and the size, there might be an incremental additional SDC due. But you would only pay for the size in excess of what it was before. And in case of a single-family residence, since they're all charged the same thing, there's no additional charge.
Yeah. Well, it's
Okay,
an
well,
extra
we've got a
thing.
lot up on Oakfield that's been on the market, and they've passed some, planning has seen some plans, but now the property is on the market, and they're going from a single family to a triplex. That's proposed. So do they fall under this, or
Yes.
would they only pay for like 2 as opposed to 3, because one was already there?
What you would do is you would calculate, so if it were a single-family residence, it would pay $74.77, because it's a triplex. They should pay 3 times the multifamily rate, right? So 3
Per
times,
unit.
that's a little less than 18,000 total, minus the $74.77 is
Okay.
what they would pay, the difference between the single-family and the triplex.
Okay. All right. And then what about redevelopment? Like, let's say somebody took their, so if you took your house from a single story to a double story, you're just...
No charge.
No charge. So how about when you talk about, there's a
Parks.
building on there's a building somewhere and they're gonna take it from somebody that was, let's say somebody was just running a single man operation and now all of a sudden they're gonna rebuild this thing into a, I don't know, medical offices. So where does that fall into these categories?
Same kind of thing. So whatever it is before the redevelopment,
Uh-huh.
you would calculate that SDC. So let's say it was, you know, a real small retail, it was an old house that's set up to sell a few things maybe, and they're redeveloping it into a much larger general office building.
Right.
Then you would calculate that SDC per office by the square feet, and again, subtract what it was before.
So
and
there
then
is
just
a
pay the
chance to
difference.
recoup for larger.
Yep.
Okay, okay.
Developing into larger.
On
Yeah.
the
so
commercial
it-
side, not residential.
Hmm?
Right, not residential into residential, yeah, unless it's just that
Mhm.
single family.
Oh, they've missed millions.
So one other thing I'll say before we get to the next steps, you know, we'll often hear from the development community and home builders, commercial developers, about the impact that these could have on disincentivizing development, right? And I'll just, you know, people argue this long into the night, but I can only say from seeing it that some of the highest SDCs that we've seen around the state are in some of the most rapidly growing cities in the state, and it hasn't discouraged development at all. And I've also seen cities cut SDCs to try and encourage development, and nothing's happened. You know, it's part of the math that developers do when they're deciding whether or not to develop in your city, but it's only part, and it tends to be a small part compared to the other things that they're weighing. So that's part personal opinion, but observation too over 27 years of doing this. So just for what it's worth. And then next steps. So as Jim mentioned, the draft report is available right now. That May 8th public hearing is the first day that the county, the city council could act to adopt the charges. The council can't act before that because of the 90-day notice period. There's a couple different notice periods. But, and then at that hearing or after, the city could adopt these charges or an amount up to the calculated charges. Any questions?
What obligation does the city have to actually fulfill the goals of the master plan for parks? You know, if you have a very small amount of redevelopment or new development and generates a small amount of income, you might not make enough in SDCs to pay for even one or two of the projects on your list. Do you have people wanting a refund if nothing new gets built, or?
So interestingly, there is no requirement that you know, they actually tried to write into the law that the capital project list had to be something that the city intends to build, and they actually didn't even get that language in there. So what the law allows you some flexibility to add or delete projects from the list. And it's sort of understood that if the growth doesn't occur at the pace we're forecasting, then it just means that project list is going to be pushed out over a longer period of time. There is no time limit that says you have to spend these within 6 years or 10 years or 15 years. The only issues that would cause are political issues, I guess, if you were
But
generating fund balance and not spending.
By the same token, you can't divert that money to something else. Once it's come in as an SDC, that's all it can be used for.
That's right.
So if you build up a big fund, you might as well put it to that, because you can't put it to something else.
That's right, and you can only spend it on
Capital.
this
Yeah.
percentage of
Really?
each project.
Right.
So you can't exceed the growth-related portion of each project. The remainder, so in the case of park improvement, 30,000 can come from the SDC. That 10,000 that's left has to come from other funds.
Can you talk about, to kind of follow up on Mike's question, in 10 years, we don't do the projects and we do a new master plan and adopt new SDCs, how that, there's actually ways to figure that in too?
Oh. So, yeah, we'll look, so let's say we have something like us, in 10 years from now, you do an update to the Parks Master Plan, it's going to take a look at what the inventory of parks was at that time, and maybe what still may be needed, and how much growth is expected from that point on, and then you recalculate everything to recalibrate it to those new conditions. So, and if you have a large fund balance, for example, let's say you have collected SDCs and haven't spent it, you have to deduct that from the SDC calculation at that time, so you're not collecting for anything twice, if that makes sense. Yeah. Is that what you're...
Yes, exactly, yeah.
So the things that you have listed on there, project types, that is not all of what we have here. Am I correct?
Is that the master plan?
This is our master plan.
So I believe this is a highly compressed summary of what's in the master plan.
Because we have a lot of stuff in
We've
here.
got 43 projects in there, and we're basically categorizing each one. So we got
14
5 neighborhood parks, 14 growth share eligible projects. I couldn't tell you which exactly, then one word. 2 trail projects. So so I'm leaving out a lot of that detail.
All right.
If you actually go to the report, the actual list that's online,
Oh, yeah.
there is the list. I mean, pages and pages, so it's
Right.
it's broke down. This was just for this was just to kind of have a general
Right. So,
conversation.
and that is part of this
Correct.
that we have.
So if you go to the actual report, and by law you have to have this, you have to have the actual list of projects, and as you can see, there's pages.
Oh,
of them.
okay.
So they're in the actual report.
Got it.
Yeah.
We worked really closely with Steve, who was the park master plan author. And we worked with him on a number of these, so we worked together. You know, he knows what we need, and we know what.
Okay.
Steve did. Yeah, we worked closely with you, I think.
Great, thanks.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Ha.
Look at it. I got a hair for...
Thanks, John. I'm assuming Jim has your contact information, should we need it?
Yep.
Is that correct?
Page.
You know, I didn't turn that very last page
Yep,
in there.
right there.
Okay. It is right there. Thought I turned that.
So what happens after the public hearing again on May 8th? Can you tell me that again?
Also adopt them.
That adopts it.
So that's the city council one.
And then what happens, and then how many days do you have to wait till after that?
This is a resolution, so it'll take effect immediately.
Oh, okay.
We're already
The
in the
next
waiting
day or
period.
whatever.
Yeah, we're in
Okay.
the waiting period now.
Yeah.
We have 60 days to go. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Thanks.
Nice, John.
Does anyone else, before we move ahead, does anyone else have questions or further discussion that they want to talk about the SDCs? Okay. So number 4 on the agenda is giant. So we need a better plan and approach of how we're going to look at it. It says action plan discussion. So we've got a list of things here that are considerations. And I'd like to kind of skip past the duties section of those top 3 for a second, and then just briefly talk about the second section before we get into the third section at all. So the middle part that says Park and Recreation Board proposes the following action items for 2018. There are A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I. So there's 9 items on this list. Of 9 items on those lists, I believe that 5 of those we can accomplish or are on our way to accomplishing with little to no input from City Council. It doesn't mean we don't want your help, or we don't need it for some factors, but advertising an online volunteer sign up and creating a searchable database. I had mentioned at the last meeting, which I understand not everybody had a chance to listen to the meeting minutes of, is a project that I feel capable of working on independently. I'm a school teacher this summer. That's something that I can work on with help from other people, but I don't think it really needs necessarily a lot of city council guidance aside from if you already have a similar database that we could build the structure similarly. For the second item, build a list of community contacts from past partnerships and create a newsletter. We would obviously want to make sure that the newsletter is approved and not going counter to any of the city council's interests or goals. But I think that creating that contact list and building that newsletter is something that we can also do pretty independently. Looking at dates, I don't think anybody wants to do it. Well, I'm speaking personally. I don't want to do any work in December, so I would really think if it was going to be quarterly, that a winter one would be November, December, January. Spring would be February, March, April. Summer would be May, June, July. So I think kind of our next target goal for that would be May at the earliest, that we could get that up and going.
So what's your vision here for a newsletter, I guess?
Well, hold on. Before we get to that, sorry, I'll try to talk faster. Inviting Energy Kayak to the April board meeting, implementing Parks SDCs, and completing a resurfacing of the Max Patterson tennis courts. Those are all things that I think we're generally on our way. We've done work on those. We haven't heard any rallying cry from City Council of, pump the brakes, what are you doing? You know, that's a terrible idea. So I think for those 5, I kind of want to start with those 5 and ask City Council, do you see it the way I see it? Do those 5 kind of seem like, yep, we don't really need to be involved in that? And then we move, and then if that's the case, Mindy, then we can talk later and we can look at, okay, what would that newsletter look like? What would that database look like? But we can do that within our own board meeting time. And in terms of a work session, I'm more interested, what I'd really like to do for tonight is to see when we talk about the other things on the list, like exploring park user fees, exploring how the transient lodging tax could be incorporated, or how to best utilize those the available capital funds for projects. That's where I'd most like to know, are there direction from City Council or there guidance that you could offer us, or are there things that we could offer you where communication both ways would be helpful. So that was a very long-winded, I'll try to kind of re-summarize it. I think there's some things on the list that we don't need a lot of input on and other things that we do. And I'd like to propose starting with asking, you know, am I even facing north? Do I have the map oriented the right way?
Just for some clarification so I understand about the second item, can you give me an example of some of these past partnerships that you're referring to that would be
yeah, so that would be like the Columbia River Council, or where we've done grant work where Port of Portland,
Sol, Clackamas River Basin Council.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. That helps me understand what you mean.
Because they've always said, you know, at the end, we've enjoyed working with you, maybe we could work with you again, and they have resources, and a lot of times their project money helps us accomplish far more than what we could accomplish within our own budget. And if they are fishing around, metaphorically, not actually, for a location for a project, we want to try to stay at the forefront of their mind of like, pick us, you know, that we're...
Connections open I mean,
right.
Connected is great. Yeah.
Okay, so I guess I'm a little confused because the other committees and boards that I sit on, the governing body, which would be like the county's board of county commissioners, go to these groups and give them a task or multiple tasks that they have to complete within the next 12 months. So is that what we're looking at? Are high-level tasks that give you guys a purpose to meet once a month, and then a lot of these other things like the volunteer sign-up, that's more housekeeping stuff. I don't consider that really a task. I
would disagree. I think that trying to get the contact information of the people that we have and build it into, when we talk about parks and recreation, so much of the work that is being done in Gladstone Parks is being done by residents, and that has been great.
That's only a couple of parks.
But there are a couple of parks where residents are doing a lot of work, and my past experience with programs is that if you don't thank people at some point, if you don't organize people at some point, then eventually they say, well, I'm sick of doing all this free labor for you for no recognition, and I'm going to stop doing it. And if we have people who are already organized and motivated, and we can use that as a blueprint to try to get even more people motivated and invested, then that's something that my goal or my dream would be to see that built into something that is sustainable, self-managing, and self-sufficient, so that people like Jim, when they're trying to plan their maintenance, have something of like, okay, well, we know friends of this park, you know, whoever that is, are really going to take care of tasks A, B, and C, and that it's not like we're going to cross our fingers and hope that they continue to do that.
Can I chime in?
Yes.
Please. I'll try to be brief about it. Our board here, there's only 2 people that have had the experience with the parks, and it's Kelsey and Steve, who's not here tonight. I think the rest of us are new to it, and we came in, now I'm talking my opinion, we came in and looked for direction from Jim. I think we had our own ideas, and so we've been a little bit more of a little think tank, and that's where I think we've developed some of our ideas. Yeah, there's stuff, obviously, you know, Kelsey led us in things that have been happening the last couple of years, and I think we solidified some of that.
And hopefully a lot of that stuff is finally done.
Yeah, I mean,
opening the door to do something else other than just sit around and...
is the hard work that was put in the last couple of years on this, and then this group, we were able just to come together and say, yeah, let's do this. So I think the list that you have before you is what we were asked to prepare. I think Jackie guided us on that also.
Okay. So you don't need like high level. For me, I would say number 1 is let's look at user fees, and I would say this is what you guys are charged to do. Spend the next 10 months or whatever flushing that out and seeing where that lands.
So I guess we're saying the same thing.
Yeah,
when I'm
saying
like some of these things on this list are things that I think that we can manage.
Right.
Maybe that's what you're calling housekeeping.
Yes.
That we can manage that internally, that we can do those as small projects while working towards a big goal.
Yes.
So I guess my first question is, do you see any need or any wish to be involved further with the pickleball resurfacing? I mean, I think the SDCs we're hoping are just let the days pass by on the calendar until that's a done deal. Inviting Energy Kayak, that's something that could turn into something huge, but we got to get them in the door to see what they have to say first. And the databases are big projects for us, but they're not necessarily things that we need input from you.
No, and I think there's other groups that are also looking at creating databases. So I think you could combine with them and come up with one main database.
Okay, so it sounds like good, and it seems like we're in agreement there.
So the ones that Kelsey, that you've already named off, I think
are the ones that we should talk about tonight.
I think we've done a good job on moving on those, but the park user fees,
yeah, the bigger
I think that's
level
a big one.
stuff that I think you guys need to spend.
Yeah, this is,
and then the transient lodging tax, we don't know how that all works, and
I don't know what you guys think. I don't think that should even be something on your radar. I think you need to
really?
focus on...
Oh, I thought that was a high level.
Really, the transient lodging tax, Jackie, we're not looking at that for parks. We're looking at that more for economic development, or is that...
So at the last meeting when we brainstormed ideas to put into a work plan, the transient lodging tax came up, but that would be more my administratively looking into creating an ad hoc committee for transient lodging tax.
Okay.
But knowing that that's the Parks and Rec Board's desire for us to see if we can do promotional brochures of the parks or something of that nature. So I wouldn't say that's a task for them to do, but it's something that they're interested in and administration exploring, so.
We have a river that runs through it.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely, we need to
And the
capitalize on that.
idea of if there was some kind of festival, I think that was the very specific idea around the transient lodging tax. If there was some kind of festival that then we could advertise and hold in a park, that may be a way of something that tied in to that. Because it does have to be like a marketable event that's for tourists,
Yes.
correct? Right, Jackie?
Yes, it has
Okay.
to be a nice overnight stay, but I guess looking at this list, a lot of these you guys are almost finished with, and I do think exploring park user fees would be a very good use of this board's time this next year.
Yeah, and I think that you guys need to look at it in an organized way, maybe get sample examples from other communities.
So that would be a number one.
Well, I think
so. We got
it's
a lot of projects.
it becomes its own beast. You know, it becomes like the Parks Master Plan. It's a slow moving elephant that you're slowly poking
No, I hear
to
that.
walk forward in the direction you want it to go. And so I think we would still try to accomplish the other things on the list as we went along through the rest of the year, but maybe some of those other things are smaller things that happen or smaller projects that, you know, I'm hoping that the pickleball resurfacing is done.
Well, that's on
We're on
council
the-
now.
Yeah, tomorrow night.
Yeah.
Right.
Bill's got a big presentation he's doing.
No,
Yeah, but
it won't include the
Yeah,
resurfacing.
I consider housekeeping
That's a
kind of
different
So
thing.
you've adopted a master plan, you've identified projects, and now we need to identify funding sources. And one of those is to explore what other cities in the Clackamas County area do in regards to park user fees. Because we agreed that we shouldn't really put another tax on the citizens right now as a park fee, because we want to capture revenue from all of the people that are visiting our parks from out of the area, and so that's why it ranked really high to explore park users.
Yeah, I think that's probably the most critical thing on this list, honestly. We want more money, and we don't want it on the backs of our citizens.
Kelsey, I was really happy to hear what Bruce said. I think about that kind of new input and people who are already committed to parks. I know a lot of you are already involved in the nature park especially, and that volunteer involvement has been a very positive thing. There are probably jurisdictions that have greater resources that might be able to do things on a more city-funded basis, but the fact that we have people who have a strong, just personal connection to the parks, I think is something that makes Gladstone different, and in some ways it's a positive thing. One of the things that I feel is important is that with parks you have to, every once in a while, kind of reinvent them for what they're about for people, and I think the pickleball thing is a perfect example of that, of recognition that maybe outdoor tennis courts in an Oregon climate is not the best use of space in a park, but that a slightly different, slower paced or something thing might be good, and so that might be an example. But one of the things, maybe a higher level way of looking at this too, is for the tourist promotion that's sort of needed in terms of using transient lodging taxes. It doesn't need to be just kind of an event that you can point to, but more, I think, of an attitude. I'd like us to explore the possibility of really integrating more city departments with what the parks do. I spoke to some of you about this one day when we were pulling ivy up there, of really seeing how, for example, our libraries or our school systems could make use of the park. I was just excited to see that the schools have applied for a grant through Metro to use either the nature park or the park adjacent to the middle school that's kind of not
Up against
using
Cracksburger.
Yeah, next to Cracksburg, for a place where there could be some ongoing outdoor nature education. And if the libraries were to develop, and I've said this in other settings too, the Friends of Gladstone Nature Park have put out websites and flyers and other things that let the community know of the birds, the flora and fauna that are a part of that. And if the library were to sort of act as the park rangers and develop resources that people could check out of the library or have made available there, so that we could promote this city as the #1 city in the country for getting children connected to nature. You know, that if you kind of look at it on a bigger level than that, that's the kind of thing, and then you say, and that means that you're always looking for ways to make sure the schools are using your parks, that the Historical Society is looking for walking trails through your parks that touch little aspects of the history of the city of Gladstone. You know, you try to connect all those things and integrate them into a way where the parks become a central focus of much of what you're trying to do, especially in the way you reach out to families and children in the community. And I think that if you promote that well, I think you can motivate the kind of tourism that you want, that qualifies then for using those funds to help with some of the other projects you want to do.
Should we make that one of the tasks, that they need to look at how to integrate community education and usage?
Well, and I guess I feel like, you know, when I applied for the Parks Board,
Thank you, Michael, by the way. I appreciate that.
several years ago, I had a newborn baby, and I was on maternity leave, and I was incredibly isolated, and I felt like, what recreation? You know, we have parks, but we don't have any recreation. I still feel like, you know, and then I came in, and I sat down at my first meeting, and I said, blah, 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 this is what I want to do. And people said, like, well, we don't have a parks master plan, so hold your roll. And then, you know, 2 years later, I would still like to build some kind of recreation program. And we do have recreation programs within, you know, in partnership with Clackamas Community College and Gladstone Community Education, and those things are good. But my background and my history as a school teacher and a programs organizer at the school teacher level, I mean, I appreciated my 20s a lot, but the main thing I did in my 20s a lot was crash and burn, where I would build programs, and they were based around me, and then based off of people's public opinion of me or the program, or whether I needed to move for my husband's work. When I left, the program left. There are way too many programs all over America that are person-centric. They're based around one person who's a linchpin holding everything together. And if that person leaves for any reason, the whole thing falls apart. And so I think part of what I view, and maybe we do need to shore up the wording or change it for A and B, is what I really see, and I'm calling these A and B, these bullet points here, for advertise a volunteer, you know, building a database of community volunteers and building a contact list of people that have worked with the city of Gladstone. You know, there may come a day where I say, well, I want to go to my kid's game, and I don't want to be the parks chair anymore, and I don't have time for this, and I'm not going to volunteer for this role anymore. And I want whoever steps into this role to be able to say, great, well, here's the playbook. And I feel like right now Gladstone has so many wonderful assets, and they're all in people's heads, and they're not written down, and that's fine to a point. And so I think that I view the first two things on the list as definitely not housekeeping, as they need to be that foundational, and it's all semantics, doesn't matter, but we need to get that foundational level of who are the players in the team, who's in the game, and then can we get more people in the game, and then how do we organize it? If we ever want to have any kind of paid position for a volunteer coordinator, and we're never going to lobby anybody to say we need a volunteer coordinator, because if we do that, the first question is going to be, well, how many volunteers do you have, and do they really need a coordinator? And we don't have answers to those questions. I have no idea how many volunteers we have, and some of them show up at our meetings and say, hey, you should come out to High Rocks and volunteer with me, and I say thank you to them, and I should do more, but I think that's where part of where I view that those bigger goals as a starting point for that. And so maybe the language needs to be reworked for those to reflect that bigger goal or that hope of down the line turning it into something that aligns with so many of the things that you were saying, which I think those are the dreams that I came in with when I applied. Like, that's what I want. And then I got knocked down a few pegs of like, well, that's on the top of that building, and you got to build a ladder to get there. So.
Well, I might get knocked down a few pegs by, suggesting them too, but I think you had a really productive meeting last month to looking at sustainability of the dollars and cents that matters, and now you just need to transfer that same kind of thinking and creativity and energy into how do we sustain the personal involvement? How do we sustain the creativity of ideas? How do we sustain the connections with other organizations or grant providers or groups that are motivated to do all the same things that we want to do, so that you keep that connection there. So I can see that happening because you've got a great board of people that are motivated to do that. I hear their excitement in the voices of everybody I talk to on this board about parks things. So it's there.
So can we circle back and focus on these tasks and make a decision on, do we want you guys to do all of them? Do we want you to really focus on a couple of them?
I guess as a new parks member, I think it would be really great, as we're circling this, to hear what's your top one or two that you see as a city council member for us to focus on. Because I've only been to a few meetings, and the master plan's in. Some things are underway, like this is SDCs and things like that. So, I would like some direction on what the areas of focus is. So, go ahead, Matt.
Oh no, I'm sorry, Ben. You're fine. I think the policy issue that's directly related to SDCs, I think that we would definitely want to sit with the board and talk about guidance on that, but the SDC policy decision is definitely a council decision, and I wouldn't recommend that you guys, other than the research and the work that has to go into the due diligence paid into exploring what else is out there, the rest of it's going to be our heavy lift, really. And so I would really, my advice is that it gets kind of thrown in our direction, and we work with you guys closely on advising on it, but it's going to be a heavy lift. And I think especially now that I'm hearing we're almost adding 30 to 40% with just this particular SDC and the way that development's going on here. The rest of them, to the mayor's point, I think there's a couple of other things there. If you guys had the pick list, then we just go through the pick list, and you'd have marching decisions, not orders, but you know about what you want to focus on. And
order this list in priority.
Right. Yeah. I think I hear, it sounds to me like you have to generate something on the top two right away to be able to get some folks motivated to build those databases and what have you. I mean, it looks great, but it's ambitious, but you got to set the sights high. So, but I would caution on the policy stuff. I think that's really
I agree.
Part of that too is the messaging from your side of the table and our side of the table. They're going to be two different sets of messaging. I mean, we're both going to have very different conversations out in the community. So I just advise that we go ahead and tackle that ourselves.
For the STCs?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that our part in that is in many ways done. Voting to get it to the table is the big challenge. And
leap of faith though, and spent dollars out of Park and Rec budget to study this. Get it out there.
And it was fruitful.
Yeah, and it's not.
It will be.
It's not a tax against anybody in this community. No. It's just saying, if you're going to join our community, there's a cost.
No, but here's the conversation that'll happen. I'm at the point now in Gladstone. I've been here for 25 years. It's time for me to move on in life, and now I've got a developer telling me that the city council has implemented additional STCs to the point where that developer's not interested in my property. That's not a valid argument, mind you, but that may be one of the things that we hear about, because we have developers that come in and say, spending $2 a month on an extra fee and I'm going to go bankrupt.
Oh, yeah.
Just last week.
So the message there can be just what John said. Statistically, that's not the case.
Right, and so point being is that this is how that, Jim, you know how those conversations happen from our side. So what I'm asking is just that we basically take the burden on that and then
I agree.
Well, I'm happy to give you that burden.
I agree with, John Eichstedt here, I agree with Tammy that, you know, our conversation is focused on sources of funding. And the next big ticket item would be user fees and exploration of what's done in other cities and bring that back for a conversation. I think that's important.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess
The volunteer list, which we have to do, isn't a source of funding, but it is a source of unpaid labor. You might think about volunteer labor.
But that's not
And
a
it all that-
full board
That's right.
activity, that's a 1 or 2 person activity.
Right, exactly. So,
so
although it does have a dollar, sort of
value.
yeah, a value. It does have a value.
Right, but I
But
think-
I agree with you. I think that would be our next big ticket item is looking at user fees.
Yeah, and on the volunteer, you need to coordinate with the Historical Society and
Yeah.
the library. All those
Yeah.
people are also trying to bring a master
And put it all under one roof.
that
Yeah.
together, so, and senior center, everybody's trying to do that.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause
Didn't
we
know
don't
that,
get to
but
talk
now you
with
know.
them. Yeah.
I guess my biggest question would be, then do you have, if we focus in on the park user fees, I could use a little education personally of what's the process look like. So I understand there's data gathering. I understand we go look at neighboring communities. We see what they do, how they do it. We do some case studies. We come up with some ideas. If we come up with an idea that we're really happy with, then what happens? I'm actually but I'm just saying I could use some education on, like, what does that process look like? We give a recommendation to you and then you vote,
Yeah.
or?
Yeah. I would get Metro involved, because they probably have a lot of information already. Reach out to them, don't you agree, Matt? And
Yeah,
have
they
them
would have
come in and do some
user
kind of a
fee information.
presentation, and they can help guide you through the process. They're invaluable. They're wonderful to work with.
And then once we decided on what we thought was, even if we say it's just for one park, like maybe we're going to start with
Yeah.
one park only, and we're going to maybe do it for like the summer season only, or we're going to do it only connected to people who rent out soccer fields or whatever. We come up with a recommendation, and then we bring it to City Council via our liaison, and then
Yep.
City Council votes to implement it.
And I think putting a time frame like September, come up with something by September, so that you have a milestone.
Do you have a list of contact? Is there a list of contacts like at Metro, suggestions of who to talk to? I mean.
Well, we have some of that. We do have some contacts with Metro. We
Okay.
could.
Yeah, I would definitely talk to them.
Okay. Pardon?
Oh, Neil.
We got a couple of these things that are up, that means they wanna talk.
Yes. Got it.
Go ahead, Neil, you were first.
Oh, okay. So, to answer Ben's question, I would go with also the park user fees. I mean, it's been discussed for several years. Our hands have been tied on Meldrum Bar, which I understand is going to be expiring here pretty soon, isn't it?
Well, the boat, but actually our hands weren't really tied on that. You could charge, but there was a limit.
Right, okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. So, and Tammy Bannock has a report that Steve Voss put together a few years ago when he was in high school, and as a summer temporary help in regards to that. So just, I'm not saying that that's, you know, the answer, but some interesting reading.
Is that the 2010 report?
Sounds about right.
Yeah, I have that too.
Okay.
So one of the things, two points here. One, in working with the parks groups that we work with, one of the things is, we ask for volunteers and they all get down there. And somebody's got to have a plan. There has to be an end result so that you can show people your vision so that it comes together, right? So when we talk about doing this volunteer sign-up, people are going to say, yeah, I'd love to volunteer. What do you want me to volunteer for? And we don't have a thought here about what we're volunteering for. In my visualness, I need an end project. I would, as a volunteer, I want to know, what is it you're asking me to volunteer for? What is our vision of getting things done in order to collect all these names for that? And then on the other side of that, we're out looking for money. Okay, so now we're gonna do these SDCs and hopefully gain some momentum there. And we're gonna do park user fees and we're gonna gain some momentum there. But sooner or later, somebody's gonna ask us, well, what are we doing with this money? What are we doing? We haven't explored that. So, I guess I'm not seeing a vision except to make more zeros on our bank account.
There's an endless, I can
I
puke
know
out
that.
an endless supply of things
But
to spend
now
money
we
on.
go back to that, okay.
We have a list.
Maintenance in the plan.
And that's the last bullet point on here. How to best utilize available capital funds on projects that people can seize, so that you can easily point to.
There's projects adding new infrastructure, and then there's projects repairing what we have. I mean, when's the last time somebody drove down Meldrum or down to Doll Beach and you feel like you need a 4-wheel drive driving through? I mean, there's just stuff like that, and so there's an endless supply of stuff.
So I guess my question to you is that, does the Parks Board talk to people and work that, or is we just get the money and then the Public Works spends it?
Well, I think both. I think we start developing funds, which isn't going to happen overnight. It's going to take a couple years.
Right.
And then we sit down and we talk about that. It's going through the whole budget process. What are we going to do? We're going to put half of it to capital and half of it to replacement of the failing infrastructure? I mean, that's the whole budget process. It would come after we have money to put into
This
this.
group advises on the biennial budget, so this next year you would explore on user fees and capturing SDCs, and then about this time next year is when we'll start the biennial budget process, where this group would make a recommendation to the council on how we should spend that money on projects. So yes, this group will have a role in that.
So we have to have the money before we can go after a project.
Depends on what kind of project. So if you're looking at the projects from the presentation here, where you have the potential to spend 75% of the or 76.9% of the total budget from SDCs, well, you got to have that SDC money before you can spend that SDC money on improvements. But there are other things that are not necessarily SDC tied or flat out are not eligible for SDC. Basically everything on here, this does not increase capacity. This last, if you look at page 9 of this.
There's over $2 million worth of stuff.
Yeah,
well, I guess my question here is,
I've got something here that says about $3 million.
they say, okay, so I look at this
Right.
big 10-year thing.
Right, there you go.
It says SDCs, grant, private funds, and to be determined. This is just for one item, neighborhood park acquisition. Well, if that's not specifically on our radar, then we're not out looking for the grants. We're not out looking for private funds. We're not, I guess to me, we need, why don't we have an end result here?
Well, and I guess
the result is doing this plan.
But we can't do all of that. We need to pick.
Right,
Right,
and so
and that's what you'll do. So when we go into our next
that's the
budget
last
cycle,
thing
like
on
Jackie
this
said,
list.
we're going to
Why
have
is it the last thing
resources.
on the list?
And if we decide to do a user fee at a park or something like that, part of that process, what is that going to generate? And that's going to go into our calculating of how much money we have available to do what. So let's say we figure we're going to have $100,000 a year, just throwing a number out there. And then we're going to have a conversation, do we spend $100,000 a year on capital projects? Do we spend $50,000 and put $50,000 in repairing our existing infrastructure? That's the conversation we need to have after we know we're going to have money coming in. But to sit here and have these conversations, we have no money coming in is futile. I mean, it's why?
And I guess that is why. So it's if we scroll down on, I don't know who has access to this. I don't. But if we look at this list of how to best utilize, the last thing on the list is how to best utilize the available capital funds on projects. So the tricky part about this list is that last month, we were deep in nobody had seen sunshine for months, and I hadn't eaten dinner, and we were just trying to come up with a list that made sense of should it even be on the list. I think a good thing to come out of tonight's meeting would be to, whether that's me, whether that's us as a group, I don't really care one way or the other, is to rewrite this as a true action plan. The goal of this for tonight was to propose these things as action items and to see if city council said immediately you should pump the brakes on any of those things because they're bad ideas. So I think the really positive thing that's coming out of tonight is there's not a single thing on the list so far, except for maybe the transient lodging tax that's pretty low on the priority list if we have all these other things to deal with first. We haven't heard any feedback from city council of, whoa, you're way off the tracks, you're off the rails here, this is a terrible idea, please come back to join the sane people over here. So I think if we're getting the feedback that we're generally headed in the right direction, that's great. And then we kind of need to move these into different camps. Stuff that's essentially, hopefully, already done, like the pickleball court and the SDCs. Not done, but like our portion of it right now is done or on the back burner. And then there are things that we can kind of do as a meeting by meeting. You know, we can invite Energy Kayak to give a presentation. That's a one thing in April. We can bring Metro in. That's a one thing. But then it sounds like the two big things as ongoing continued projects for 2018 are exploring the park user fees and figuring out we do have some money to spend before we bring in a single SDC or user fee. Otherwise, none of our parks would stay functioning at all. And we need to talk about, as a group, what do we want to prioritize, then where do we want to go with this. And so I think the big challenge is figuring out which comes first, because they feel very chicken and egg. And Jim, what I believe I'm hearing you say, and I'm not sure if I'm right, is that you believe if we had two big fish to fry, the park's user fees and figuring out how to utilize our available capital funds, that you think user fees should be first and capital funds should be second. Am I hearing that correctly?
Absolutely, because you can't do the other one. We do have a little bit of money in there. That's gone. Now what, right? Yeah. So we really need to explore, and you can even call this something else, sustainable revenue.
Sustainable revenue.
You know, that could be a multitude of things. We could rent out our shelters, we could do this, we could do that. I mean, there's a lot of things.
So should that be, that's what we should call it then?
Sure. Sustainable revenue source for the Parks Department, because right now we have none. It's just whatever we can get out of the general fund. There's nothing.
And we've known that, and that's a discussion that we've had.
Because without
constantly.
that, none of this is going to happen.
And like, God forbid anything happened to our volunteers or to Jim. You know, it's like I wouldn't know how to maintain or keep anything going.
So I think that. Oh, I'm sorry. You had your thing up.
Well, I just want to say I don't want to put a brakes on any of this, but I don't want you a year from now to feel like, gosh, all we talked about was money and capital projects, and I was into Parks and Recreation, which I thought was programs, and I might as well have joined the Budget Committee or the Audit Committee. So let's kind of keep the balance. Maybe because I have a little more of the same kind of background as you do, I still want a fair amount of your focus to be on how can the parks in this community serve the residents of the community and the visitors to this community, and serve the goals of making this a better place for everyone who lives here. So, keep those program ideas. If we want to have the high school choir sing selections from the Broadway musical Hamilton in one of our parks on the 4th of July as a community event and get folks out, keep thinking about stuff like that, because that's what is going to help motivate people to support any fees that you have or any taxes that we impose at some time in the future, or any SDCs. If we can say, look at all the great things we do with our parks, then you're going to get support for all the forms of revenue that you come up with, or at least more support than you would have if you weren't doing anything there. So let it be something. Keep those creative juices flowing. You guys joined, I think a lot of you for the same reason that Kelsey did. You cared about those things too. So don't turn it all into a big bureaucratic focus.
You're supposed to have fun.
There's a need for that, but have some fun. Make it fun, because when it's fun for you guys, you're the ones. I just marvel at the stuff that comes out of the Friends of Gladstone Nature Park group. And if we had groups like that were motivated to to produce great events and great programs using all the other parks and things that we have in this community. You know, this would be an awesome place.
Well, yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Need to put myself in. There we go. You're absolutely right. Bringing people to the parks, it's all done volunteer. It brings attention to the parks, these activities do. Makes people aware that the parks are there, and then they're more likely to say, oh, we're willing to put some money in.
Let Neil went to the bathroom.
Yes.
They're breaking it.
So then maybe the tasks,
Yeah.
the sustainable revenue source and park use capitalization ideas.
And a focus on volunteer activities. To continue the community focus on the parks, awareness.
That part of capitalization.
Okay.
Volunteer.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think that kind of circles back to the duties at the very top. And that was one of the things that I kind of skipped over at the beginning.
Yeah.
But that is that very first thing, you know, that maintain citizen involvement. And Michael, I hear that in what you're saying, you know, don't give up on those smaller things and look at those projects. And I think that we have been, you know, it's just felt like embroiled in this Parks Master Plan for so long that we had such turnover on the board, and the people, you know, me and Stephen were just like, we're going to push that train, you know, off this, like we must finish this, for so long that and we had a couple other projects like with Meldrum Bar and with Doll Beach and stuff. I think that we in many ways have just felt for so long that we've been slogging. Like we, you know, we just have to get through this, we have to finish this, and then we're going to be to this like pretty grassy field where we're going to finally be able to lay down and rest and dream up new ideas. And I think the thing is we're actually finally there, you know, we're finally at this grassy field, but maybe it means that we need a different, you know, focus or way to how we run our monthly meeting. You know, maybe it means that we're going to have one big, like, continuing project where we're going to say we're going to break down this big task of investigating user fees or sustainable revenue, and we're going to look at that over, you know, the course of 4 meetings, and we're going to break it down into smaller chunks. And then at the same time, we're going to maintain some other part of the meeting dedicated to smaller things like, okay, this month, pickleball courts, we're getting it done. And then the next meeting, then we're going to do this. And the next meeting, we're going to do this. So maybe it means now that we have some breathing room, how we accomplish this stuff and what our meetings look like, maybe we get a chance to finally incorporate some of that, where before we didn't really. The stuff that we haven't really touched on are the last 2 things, staff considerations for discussion. So, I mean, I'm just going to read this. So the nature park site plan due to increased, I don't know, did you put this on the list, Jim?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, your staff, you talked to it, yeah.
Okay. So,
I don't know why I'm trying to say things.
no surprise there, but there's a lot of interest with the nature park, and with this last, what really brought this to light was with the school wanting to do that grant, they're wanting to see what's your plan there. We don't have a plan there necessarily, and the master plan even talks about having a plan there. And so that's why I just wanted to bring it up for discussion. Should we consider doing a site plan there? If we put in a parking lot, where would it go? If we put in a bathroom, where would it go? Because then you can go out and get these grants for that part. And, you know, if you read the master plan, some of the things that were brought up with that is there's a bunch of fill in some areas. So obviously when we're making this plan, we don't put stuff there. There's a future reservoir site there. Obviously you wouldn't put something there. And so to have a plan, it sounds silly. We're planned out. We've got this plan. Now we think about another plan, but this would be a much smaller version. Just that site specific. So that's why I brought that up, and I think it's something for consideration is why I wanted to.
There actually is a master plan for that park, but it shows a sketch of a library building and
Oh,
parking.
yeah, but it's new intended purpose.
Valid.
Right.
So
Yeah.
can we contact Metro, go
Poke that
after
hornet's
Nature and
nest.
Neighborhoods grant to do a
The
plan?
plan? Does somebody want to take that and get a hold of Metro and see if there's a,
That this is what they excel in.
yeah.
Huh. So we actually.
I don't want to volunteer for that
Call
today.
Metro for what?
Nature and Neighborhoods.
Nature, I just, if I'm gonna volunteer,
You know,
call, I'd like to know what I have to say.
Yeah.
They have a whole bunch of different kinds
Nature
of
in
grants
neighborhoods?
available.
Nature in or and?
In neighborhoods. But that may not be the perfect fit. They've got probably half dozen grants that are made just for park support.
Good start, though.
Okay.
And I think that's really your third task is to research funding to have a site plan done on Nature Park, because what we're finding is there's a lot of events, there's a lot of trees, a lot of wonderful things going on. Far be it for the city to have to come in and tear it all out because a water reservoir is supposed to go there, and that's why we want to make sure we're doing our site plan so that we don't have any future issues there.
Well, for example, originally this grant that the school's putting in for, they were wanting to do a covered shelter to hold 4 picnic tables and so many students. I mean, and someone giving money to the city for that, they want to see a plan, you know. So I think that if we have a plan for that site, because out of all of our parks,
The
that
most
one's
nebulous.
probably the most likely to get developed next, right? So
And that's a big, nice green
Mhm.
space in Metro's portfolio.
Right.
So I think they'd be very
Right.
excited to be asked.
I'd suggest you look at, also look at the, community enhancement grants. I think we're eligible.
Where are you looking at
Via
that?
Metro.
Metro's
Okay,
community enhancement
community.
grants.
Enhancement.
because we have a plan, our chances go way up
Mary
to
Rose
get.
Navarro still,
Yeah, and I also, for your volunteer coordinators, Bonnie Schaffner, she's a volunteer coordinator with Metro, and then Mary
Rose
Rose
Navarro.
Navarro.
she's the grant guru. So, not easy to work with.
So remind me, Jackie, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Remind me how, if we find something, what do you prefer that we do?
A
Just
grant?
like a grant or something, just bring it to you before we say anything and let us know if that's something.
I think if you're researching grants and you find something that might be suitable for what we're trying to do, that Jim and I could look at it first before you put any work
Right.
into it.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And then before it gets, when we're awarded it, then before the city signs, that's when it would go to council to get a final, that's part of our policy, grant policy.
Right.
Once we get it,
Okay.
and before we sign, then it goes to council, but we want to obviously take a precursor look at it, see if it's something that
So,
fits the bill.
yeah, so you have two sets of grants out of Metro. You have the NIN, which is Nature and Neighborhoods, sorry, it's a long day. But the other one that I think you really look at is the community enhancement, because you get that by being close to the transfer station in Oregon City.
Okay.
So you're competing against fewer communities for that grant.
Oh, okay.
But it's because of the garbage transfer station.
And we rarely go for grants.
And that's probably one Gladstone's never, ever competed for.
All right. Thank you.
And it would
Appreciate
directly relate to the nature park, because they have grant projects like ivy removal, all types of things like that, enhancements.
And if we do get a grant, most likely there's going to be a money match of some sort or in-kind work or something, so
Right.
I wouldn't suggest we just go in and figure out how to spend this last $75,000.
No, I
Until we have money to.
Right.
Yeah,
Say
replay.
we get $100,000, you need to do in-kind and match. Well, we can do a lot of labor and stuff for in-kind, but we'll need some money.
Oh, you've got the
Yeah,
There are some
so-
trails up there, and there's a whole bunch of money in trails
Yeah.
available too.
Oh,
Yeah.
And I think with a lot of these things, there's, grants frequently are looking for, my mother does a lot of reviewing grants with HR stuff and everything, and nobody wants to give you money for operating expenses. They don't want to help you just run your day to day. They want to help you build something that then you can run
Yes.
your day-to-day. And so I think that the nature park does have a lot of appeal in terms of the grant of like, look, we're just trying to build something and then we'll keep it going. And obviously the site plan's first step on that. So in terms of kind of like coming to some kind of logical conclusion, I had another question for City Council. If we come up with some kind of action items list, do we need to give it to you in any way, or is it just like nice to know?
No, I think
or
we need to have it. I think we all
Okay.
need to be on board and at least
I don't remember having
have
one
an
in
idea of
previous
what
years.
you guys are working on.
Okay.
You haven't, this is new.
Yes.
This
Okay.
is the first board that is under our new, policy for boards, commissions, and committees, that you meet with the city council and develop a work plan.
Yep.
Which
It
is
could
a
ha-
new policy,
Yeah,
right?
it
Okay.
could maybe have just one item or two, but you guys have 3 very healthy ones, plus other things you're gonna be doing, so yes, I can see you having an action plan for the council.
Is it a presentation at the council meeting then?
You certainly could add it to an agenda and they just recognize it, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
We'd
So
love that.
then I think the discussion goes to this side of the table of if I draft something and I send it out as an email,
To Jackie.
yeah, I mean,
Jim, Jack.
can hit reply all our meeting minutes and won't that get everybody, but yeah, I can send it to whoever and they can make sure it gets out to everyone. Then can we give people a time frame of like 1 week, you know, to look this over like we've done with stuff in the past and provide any feedback of like, I don't like the way this is worded, or I want to change this or that, and then kind of have a revising cycle within us with the goal of by March, I don't know,
Our next meeting,
30th,
our April 10th meeting, have it to us by April 10th.
yeah, but like if we get it by the end of March, finalized how we like it, then we can send it to them, and then they can have it at they can plan on having it on their April agenda as an action item, and one or more or whoever can go and present it, and then does that sound, is everyone on Parks Board agreeable to checking email and providing feedback?
Yeah.
Well, and I think this could be really quick. Name the 3 real quick, and everybody gives the nod, and I think we're gonna be like 90% there, right?
Yeah, I know, but then, you know, inevitably, everybody nods, and then I'll write something stupid, and somebody will say, no, tweak that word, and
Yeah.
they'll say, it's user fees, Kelsey, not you know, or whatever, so,
Put it out to
Utility
our
fee.
group and
Utility
we'll all
fees,
get
yeah.
back to you,
yeah.
and then we have a meeting the 9th.
Yeah, 'cause it's the kind of thing, you know, I'd write utility fees or something, and then somebody would say, no, you gotta catch that with John.
Jackie, our agenda on April 10th, do we have room where we
Sure.
could add this?
We'll put it on the April 10th agenda.
Okay.
Wonderful.
So then the next thing too is, do we, with all of this discussion that we've had tonight, do we still want to make it our goal to invite Energy Kayak to our next meeting in April?
Can I give you a quick update?
Yeah.
Jim and I went to Clackamas County to meet with our planner, and we have to be careful what we say because this property is now referred to the ballot. But that gentleman has been meeting with Clackamas County planning staff and going through land use process to see what is and isn't applicable before he decides whether or not to purchase it. So I know there's interest there, but that's as far as we can really talk because the citizens have to agree that we can sell it first.
So it's pumping
Before it's
station
even
area.
an issue.
Yeah, the resources.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there is interest there for that individual, and he is doing his due diligence with the county.
Do you think that means that we should push the meeting out?
His vision is larger than the River Resource Museum. His vision is to encourage kayak, canoe,
Water.
traffic.
Water
on
sports,
the,
yeah.
Water sports on the Clackamas River. So I think it would be smart to have him come because he's got some other ideas that would really mesh well with the park.
So keep the April goal.
I would.
Jackie, do you have a way of contacting him to invite him to our April meeting?
I I can ask Melissa at the county. I just want to make sure we clear the ballot measure. You know, you should wait for the ballot measure in May before we're publicly talking to a potential buyer.
Yeah.
No, I understand that, yeah.
I don't think that's what, well, at least that's not what he was talking to me about. He was wanting to come to you guys because he wants to provide a camp out of High Rocks for kids in the summer to be able to put in at High Rocks and come out at Dull Beach.
Oh.
So that was my
I guess those are
conversation
two
with
different
them.
things.
Yeah, it's totally different thing.
If you can keep the subject on that, then that'd probably be.
Yeah, I
fine.
would just put it in an agenda and stick to your agenda.
Well,
He
no,
wanted
that's why I'm
to get
asking. Would it
now
be
so that
smarter
he could-
to...
You want to be able to set it up for this coming summer, so that's
Whether
why.
he buys property or not.
Yeah, it was totally
Right.
separate from that.
Let me do some follow-up with the county on his contact information, Kelsey, and then I'll send that to you.
Okay.
And then he can decide if he wants to come talk to the board in April.
These are the kind of things that I don't want to put my foot in my mouth by inviting him in and asking him to talk about stuff, you know, if that land purchase is still out there. So I just want to be clear, if we do invite him in April, what I'm supposed to be talking about, what I'm not supposed to be talking about, and that I have that written down so I don't get them mixed up. And if it's more advisable to say, so it sounds like there's a summer goal, that is we're still bringing him in April, and then maybe there's a second thing that comes later down the road after that other stuff. And then by April meeting, we'll know the pickleball resolution, which you guys are going to vote on tomorrow night. And then,
The memorial gift donation thing.
yeah.
I put that on there.
Yeah.
So a little bit about this. This has been something on my radar to do for the city for a while, but it just kind of keeps getting pushed down. But here recently we had a family lose a daughter, and they wanted to put a memorial bench at one of the parks. So instead of having all these come to the council and stuff, I wanted to develop a policy, or consider you guys developing a policy that would allow staff to have some standards. And I had attached a draft policy in your packet there that I basically plagiarized from other cities that are doing this. And so what I would like you to do is review that, consider it, and if you're good with this language or have any comments, I'll make the changes, and I'd like to bring it back to council for approval. And you kind of see in this, what it does is it sets some standards. It allows staff to do this, say, yeah, we'll meet with you down there. If you're going to do a bench, it needs to be this bench, so we can maintain it or replace it, except for the
plaque
on it or whatever. But it just puts the city in a spot to where you can allow this, and it allows a process for it to happen. Because right now they're wanting to do it, and it's like, yeah, but is this really staff's responsibility to start letting just anything be put in the park? Not, yes, but no. So it's just to clear that up. So that's really all it is. It's nothing really
I think it's great.
crazy,
Yeah.
but if you guys like this, I'll finalize it and bring it back to council for approval, and then this will be our policy.
When would you like this to be?
Well,
Obviously, we're not going to do it tonight.
Right, no,
Okay.
yeah, we could bring it to the next council
Right.
meeting if everybody's kind of had a chance to review it and likes it.
So?
Sure.
In light of the tree over at the senior center and that whole memorial, is in this process a delineation on responsibility of maintenance?
The tree, yeah, I think they actually.
I mean, not just the tree in particular, but should they decide to plant something or put a bench in, is there a responsibility?
Well, basically, if I recall right, what it talks about on the tree is the city's not responsible for it dying if it's not in an irrigated area. That place is, so it's probably, we're going to take care of it. And if there's going to be a bench put in, we basically are saying, this is the kind of bench you put in, because now the city will maintain it.
Right,
Instead
so
of a
it's a
bench that's
donation.
not, yeah, because it's a donation. So it just kind of sets those parameters. If you want to put in a bench, it's this. If you want to put in
I'm thinking of like a planted area, a corner.
Yeah, and you don't have a...
Flowers and roses.
Oh, so you're talking something bigger than what, so then it does have, if there's a big donation, then that would be something you'd want to take to council. Let's say someone wants to donate a quarter of an acre to the city for a park, you know, or then they want to name it and stuff like that, and that would still end up going to council, and it talks about that process in here. If it's something bigger, it would have to go to council. So I think if you're talking about a whole flower bed or something, that's probably.
Well, I wasn't talking quarter acres, so I mean, if
Oh.
I mean, there was some concern with the Putterbah Memorial that it wasn't being maintained by the family, and then there was people at the city dealer, well, no.
Oh, okay.
There was that whole discussion on who maintains when a family no longer is able to.
Right.
Or chooses not to, or whatever.
Well, then that's the city's call, I guess, to do we keep maintaining it or not.
And that language, you don't have a copy of this, but just so you know, or do you?
It's in
Yeah.
there.
And that's what I was wondering,
Yeah.
I should have read first before I.
Right.
Well, on the second page, just for if you want a finger pointing you in the right direction, on the second page under procedures, it says the city does not guarantee permanency of the memorial, and if it must be relocated, the department will attempt to notify the donor in writing. You know, so I think that that's the most important thing, that there is a plan of, hey, this isn't, yeah.
And then there's a form here, so we have a contact. You know, and this is literally, I plagiarized it from a couple other cities, kind of pieced it together, and this seems to be working for them, so that's where I started. It's nothing special, really. Yeah.
So
To
the
go where
trees
others
that
have gone
we put
before.
up at the
Well,
nature park,
exactly,
that
why
is
reinvent the wheel?
outside of this, right?
At this point.
Okay.
Yes.
Because those trees were planned first, and then,
Memorial.
Well, I bought a tree in my mother's
Well,
name,
yeah,
but-
You did, okay.
yeah.
Right.
They were.
And I think the one thing it talks about with trees is this, you know, the species. I think it's the third line on procedures. You know, the exact location and the species of trees will be, you know, obviously we want to put in
and that was with that, you know.
weed tree of some sort, right? Exactly, some nasty thing that's got thorns on it or whatever.
Yeah, and that was the process where we picked the location, we picked the species
Mhm.
first, and after that was
Yeah.
already predetermined, then
Right.
they went up for naming,
Right.
gifting purposes. So that fit within the
Right.
same general procedure of what's proposed here.
Right. So the way it's kind of gone in the past is it just happens, and everybody, you know, there's a bench here, a bench there, or it doesn't happen, and it's not the city standard, so then what happens with it? Is it even safe? You know, I mean, so it's just kind of a loosey-goosey.
I can't, I have a memorial bench for my mom at Max Patterson too.
Mm.
But, yeah, we had to do to state city standards, and we clean it up, we go down there and maintain
Right.
it, or my dad does.
Right.
So the only thing I was looking at this and I was thinking, you know, we don't technically have a Parks Department to call. It is at City Works. So on bullet point 4 and 6 to add considerations of the Parks Department, and I would put at City Works behind that so that they're not calling the
At Public Works.
our Public Works, I'm sorry. at
We can
Public-
just call it Public Works, but
Instead of Parks
we do have a
Department.
Parks Department in our Public Works. but-
Exactly, in
Right.
Public Works,
Right.
but some people might call and just the city and.
Yeah, we can
Just
add
call
the.
it Public
at-
Works, that makes it
at
simple.
Public Works, sure, we can do that, absolutely, good call.
Okay, there's your revision.
Public Works, I guess that's all.
So if there's no other feedback, I'll make those changes, and we'll bring it to the next council meeting and have everybody give it a blessing, and then we'll.
We're gonna give you all kinds of stuff tonight.
Thank you.
No, that'll be awesome. Then when someone comes in, we say, we have a process for that.
We do. Perfect.
Okay, you guys, I feel like this has been really productive. I feel like we've kind of covered number 5 in terms of our next meeting, of what we're hoping to do. So in terms of next steps, Jackie's going to try to get some contact information for Energy Kayak and see what, and hopefully Jim you guys can provide us with some guidance of what parameters we might ask them to talk about. And then we've got a couple things that are agenda items for next month, just kind of checking in with, but I think that our next steps in terms of the next meeting are really actually before the next meeting, to watch for that email of the action plan. And then in terms of next meeting, do we want to give everyone some homework of go find one park that has user fees, or split up the research, John?
Actually, I wanted to revisit site plan before we summarize.
Yes, please do.
I
Tell
don't
me
think
what
we
to write
finished
down.
that discussion about who's doing the site plan, how do you do a site plan,
We're gonna get
Is it a collaborative
grant
thing?
funding first.
Yeah.
All right.
And he's gonna research Metro grant funding.
Okay.
And if we get the funds for that, then it'll be a community site plan.
Understood.
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
But we would just have somebody with the money before, to have somebody,
Right.
you know, semi-engineer design it and make sure that, you know, things work. You know,
There
for a
isn't
building
like-
where you need to have a road or,
Oh, I
you
see.
know.
Okay, so there isn't like a pre-wish list brainstorming, say, well, in a perfect world, we'd like to see these things, and
That'll
make
be
that
for
part of
the
it?
community
For the
to
community.
say,
got
I
it.
want
Understood.
a community center
Yep,
there,
yep,
or a
sure.
library. Let's put the
Okay.
no, I'm just kidding. But it's for the community to.
I was hoping that would.
Understood, yeah, yeah.
Good
Okay,
idea.
thank
Just trying to
you.
be funny. No.
All right.
It didn't
Yeah.
work.
Thanks. You were saying, Kelsey?
No, I think that that's good. So, good. I did have that stuff written down, the Nature and Neighborhoods Grant and the Community Enhancements Grants, that those are kind of the next
steps.
The next
Okay.
steps on that of what we want to look at. So then my question was, do we feel like, whew, that's enough? Or do we want to also tack on homework of some kind of everybody split up and try to pick a place, you know, where we just assign them out, Westland, Lake Oswego, Clackamas, Happy Valley, Milwaukee, Sellwood, wherever, you know, and then say, go investigate and bring back some research that you can find on what do they charge, and or do you have, yeah.
That might be easier than you think, because the city of Gladstone at least has to have a user fee list of all the fees, not just user fees, but a
Yeah.
fee schedule for,
Metro
you know,
has all
what your
that.
water costs and everything else. And every single city, probably if you just go on their website and search for fee
Mhm.
schedule,
Mhm.
you'll find it. It'll be there.
So, step one, come up with a list of cities we want to look at, divide and conquer, right?
Do you want to just assign them out tonight?
Sure.
Sure.
Anybody have a place that they want to speak
Oh,
for?
absolutely.
I'm basically, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to just say, if you go to this from John Ghilarducci and you turn to page was it? I know it was in there. He had it in there. So if you turn to page 12, I mean, I think that's our list. We have fewer people than there are places on this list, so shout out, speak for, I'll write down notes of who wants to pull from where.
Well, I'll look at Beaverton.
Okay, that's not on this list. You still want to do it?
Yeah.
I'll go to
Okay.
Beaverton, yeah.
Okay, so
Beaverton, well, I
John,
can take the west side,
Westland
Beaverton
and
was...
John Beaverton, okay, and
Tigers.
then
Westland.
Bruce,
And I'll do Wilsonville too.
okay,
All right.
I'll take Sherwood.
Mindy, Sherwood,
Hills, Gregson,
Yeah, right,
covers all them.
you got it. Thanks.
No, Bill, nobody's got that yet. Okay, so we've got Lake Oswego, we've got Westland, we've got Wilsonville, we got Sherwood.
Milwaukee and Oregon City.
Okay, so Ben's got Milwaukee and
Baldwin Hills
Oregon
covers
City.
Beaverton, Tigers, all of that.
And then
But I know
North Clackamas should be pretty well advertised. I mean, so I'll take North Clackamas, and if I have time, which I am not promising, I will try to pull Tualatin's too, since I work in Tualatin and I have easy contacts to them.
You know what, I'll take Happy Valley also. Is that, nobody's spoken for that?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
I'll do that one too. Just
Okay.
'cause I've been to some of their new parks that they've really developed, and they are pretty impressive, and I'd be curious to know what they're charging for some
Well,
of the stuff
they're
that they do.
suing the county right now, and they pulled out of the Parks District, so we'll see how well.
Okay.
See how they're...
Hey, it's still, information's information.
They paid $2 million.
Wow.
They
Here.
paid
And
$2 million to get into the...
For the North Clackamas Parks and Recreation. Isn't it $2 million?
That's their, like, membership fee to be a part of the
Yeah.
North Clackamas
Yep.
Parks District?
Yep, that's why they pulled out.
Yeah, no,
'Cause they can
the
use that $2 million for
SBCs
their
are
own
going
stuff.
to the park district, and they want, from the city, and the city's claiming that they weren't.
Cycling back in.
Right.
Yeah.
That they weren't earmarked specifically for Happy Valley project?
Yeah, but yeah, look into that one.
Okay.
Alrighty.
Okay.
Can I just make one suggest one more procedural thing. This is the first advisory board that we've had come before the council in a joint meeting to kind of work on an action plan, and we're going to do others. One of the things that we've done in the council that I have found helpful is we have kind of a strategic plan for the year that's sort of ongoing and gets updated regularly. And periodically, we look at every item on it and give it a score from 1 to 5 or 0 to 5, you know. And 5 means basically it's done, we can cross it off, we finished it. And 1 means, boy, we talked about it, but we didn't do much beyond that. And somewhere in between. And you guys have got a very ambitious list of things now that you've kind of committed to be kind of your action plan. And if you want to use a similar process to that, we as a council understand that not everything's going to get a 5 in the first year. It just doesn't happen that way. And so be honest, grade yourself, pat yourselves on the back when you do accomplish things or make substantial progress toward them, and you know, and give yourself the time you need to do the more difficult ones. But you know, I think it's great having some goals in front of you, you know, some things that you're working toward, and if they're always kind of there and they're on paper, then your meetings will be very productive and continue to be.
Awesome.
Thanks.
I think we're done.
Do we have a motion?
It's a work
I have
session
something that I
today.
need to discuss with our council. You guys don't have to be there for this.
Okay.
But I do have something that I want to bring to the parks, but the council doesn't need you guys.
All right.
Really
You're dismissed.
I just want to get rid of fall back.
Thank you. This was very helpful.
Question.
Great. So the pumping station area, the old area there, the River Resource Museum,
The rainy well.
who's made that look prettier?
We've been trying to do some stuff.
Just Jim.
Curb appeal, huh?
It's just Jim in his Captain America
Oh,
suit
the
going out
biggest
there.
issue is all the graffiti and the fence being cut and violated. I mean, so
You
they're
guys
breaking
push gravel around on the trails?
No, I don't. Maybe they did. I don't. Maybe to get their equipment in there. I haven't
Yeah.
been down there in a while.
And there's primroses planted out.
Oh, no, I don't think we did that.
Okay.
No.
You know,
If we did, we won't anymore. I mean, we're not putting roses in.
Lipstick on a pig, right?
Right.
Somebody's got to buy it.
I
It's gotta
know, I
look
know.
pretty.
Yeah, make it look good, huh?
All right, I'll see you tomorrow.
Alrighty.
That's
Have a good
fun.
night.
Yeah, I didn't go down there, Jim, but it looked, I was walking up
You were
above.
brave.
And, huh?
You're brave.
No, well, we had walked the cove there.
Oh, you didn't go by yourself.
Well, I had Terry, you know.
Oh.
She won't let me go.
Want
We're not
to
going in there.
continue recording, or do you want to?
But I saw the gravel.
Right.
Do you want to go ahead?
So I think that everybody, this is kind of distracting.
Well, they might not go right away.
Do you want to take a break?
I don't want to take a break.
All right.
This thing here has been sitting on our table since October. This is my pickleball
Oh, yeah.
agreement to try to get the courts fixed. We can't, we've been talking about this for I don't know how many meetings, and we keep pushing it off and pushing it off. As it sits now, if we don't make a decision now, this is not gonna come up till 2 more months to even get to the council. But I can tell you right now, just being out at Hillendale the last 2 days, there was over 50 people yesterday at Hillendale playing outdoors.
Mm-hmm.
There was 40 people there today. This was a work day, right? So we keep pushing this off, and after we even decide on it, we still have to put the work together to get it. So I'm kind of getting a little bit frustrated that we're not, all the meetings we've been to, this came in October, we're not addressing this.
Well, I guess my thought is what needs to. I thought the ball was in their court.
I thought we were going to council now.
For the agreement, but they need money.
The 2 things we talked about, one was the pickleball club.
Oh.
agreement. The other one was to allocate funds, $3,500 from the
Right.
city, and the pickleball club donate $5,300. and
Oh, yeah. So you need
to-
approval?
Well, we need to discuss it.
Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
The big thing is that even if we do it now, it doesn't even come up till next month's city council. So if we wait till our next meeting, it's not gonna come up till the month after that.
No, I'm with you. I'll apologize because I thought we were all in agreement that
I thought we were too.
I
moving
did too.
forward.
Yeah, and I think the plan was to just pull it out of that capital to do it.
I thought so,
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, I thought it was
The
done.
reason being is because this is is not included in what they're going
Right.
to be talking about tomorrow night. There are actually two items.
Okay.
So,
What's tomorrow?
tomorrow is to
The
decide
agreement.
the agreement between the pickleball club and the city.
And I thought it was both things.
No, I'm sorry. It doesn't include any money. It's just an agreement on us being able to use it, playing time, storing stuff, being able to operate out of there. So I apologize if there was some confusion, but there's actually.
I'm sure it was on my part.
two things. No, that's okay.
I think everybody was, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I would think everyone is.
If everybody's in
I feel
agreement
like-
tonight, it's just a matter of us cutting a check for these guys, or reimbursing them, is
Well,
typically how that
it's gotta
works.
go to the city council so they can vote.
So we would recommend
I don't think
city
so, I think
council
this is within our
approve.
spending authority.
Yeah, I thought that was
Yeah.
under our spending
Yeah.
authority,
Well,
which
see, I
is
don't
Yeah.
know, I thought
Yeah.
you had to spend, have to go
No.
to the-
Okay.
No, if you guys agree, because, you know, that capital is kinda your guys' little pot,
Right.
in a
Well,
sense.
my understanding was that if the city council tomorrow night agree, and Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, if they sign off on that, and they say, we are okay with the agreement, then it's done, and we
Right.
just write the check.
Right, or
Out of,
reimburse,
or
or whatever how we
reimburse
do
out of
it,
our
yeah.
budget, and we don't need any city council involvement or approval for that.
But do we have to state now that we're all in agreement?
Yeah, I would, I'd do
You
a
want
little
to-
vote.
do we
and-
take a
Yeah,
vote?
okay.
All right.
Okay, well, I would like to make a motion that we reimburse the pickleball
Fund.
club
Yeah.
with
$3,500?
$3,500, once approval has been given from the city council for the project, or for the, partnership itself.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Perfect, thank you very much.
Thank you for that clarification, we appreciate it.
Yeah, I didn't know there was a concern.
Well, I
there,
can see
'cause
how
thought
you
it
would be
was
so
gonna happen.
nervous,
Well,
like, wait,
the
wait.
reason being is because there's money involved, and
Yep.
for some reason I thought the
Right.
council had to approve that also, it's not.
Yeah.
together.
Well, now we don't have to wait another month, once we get that,
Oh,
hopefully
very cool.
tomorrow night.
Yeah, I
Hot
thought,
dog.
that was my hope, that that's
Okay,
done
good.
as soon
So
as they.
you
Well, I
can
think
sit
the
up there.
hang-up was insurance, wasn't it?
Okay.
Are we adjourned?
Okay, so I'm gonna, anything else?
No?
Okay, before anybody thinks of any ideas, we are adjourned. It is 8:24.